another episode of Sports Talk from A to Z. I'm one of your hosts, Avery Schaefer. Zan will be back on Thursday with me, but for now, I am with a completely different panel. As you can see, do you guys want to introduce yourself to the viewers to start off with?
Max, will let you take the lead again.
Okay. So thanks for having me on again, Gold. This is Max O'Neill. I'm a recent graduate of Ithaca College in television radio. I've known Gold for a while. I don't know how many years. How many years has it been, Gold?
5?
Yeah, maybe 5 years or so. But I'm excited to be on the podcast again.
And my name is Jake. I am a friend of Avery's. I actually led a trip where I was chaperoning him travel internationally for his own solo experience doing adventures with disabilities. And what I do in my own time is I focus on fixing the portrayal of people with disabilities in media and making sure that we have a more inclusive marketing world and representation of people with disabilities.
Okay, with that introduction out of the way, to give you guys a little bit of a rundown of what we're going to be talking about, we're going to touch on the Redskins name change. I don't know how many of you have heard about that, but that's big news, along with some BLM stuff, and Kenny Stills being charged in a Breonna Taylor protest. So with that, let's just start with topic number 1. So Max, you have told me this off air, but what do you think of the Redskins name change, and what should it possibly be changed to?
I think it's been a long time coming. I think it should have happened a long time ago, but better late than ever. I think a few of the ideas that I've had for the name change is the monuments, and I think that would be obviously appropriate. But I think my favorite idea that I've seen on social media is for the Red Tails being the new name. You get to keep the colorway, and you get to keep the "Hail to the Red" phrase that they have, while also honoring the Tuskegee Airmen, since the Red Tails was the nickname for the Tuskegee Airmen. So you could bring in race relations, and so I think it would be an awesome idea. I think it would have to come with a sick logo, though.
Now, before we go any further, you should know that your basic protest has 3 main components. One is a target, which describes who you want to act. One is a who do you want to see the message, and how do you want them to receive it. So, taking the Redskins as an example, I would say that the original intent of the Redskins logo being as it was to honor Native Americans. Yes, it was a racial slur, but that's the name. The logo itself, to me, is fine. What would you say to that, Max?
I think it's a slur, and I think whether or not it was intended to honor the team at the point of creation is irrelevant. I think, it really makes me think of is irrelevant, that it makes me think of the um, ad that the American Indian Association or something like that. I forgot the exact name of the organization. I apologize. Native American Association, something like that, put out a few years ago, and it was the Cleveland Indians baseball cap with Chief Wahoo, the Chief Wahoo logo, and then it was a logo for the New York Jews and the San Francisco Chinamen. And, those teams would never in a billion years exist. So why does, and they took Chief Wahoo off recently or in the last few years, but why does the Redskins,
2 years
something
ago?
like that? Yeah, so why does the Redskins name still exist?
Yeah, but is there a difference fundamentally between something like that and something like Blackhawks? Because
I'm going to chime in here. I think that what we need to look at is one, who's giving who permission to use certain imagery, certain names, and two, who's profiting from it. So if you're looking on the whole, that is the team, is the individuals who are capitalizing on this use of imagery, are they a part of that indigenous community? I would probably, not knowing, I'm assuming the answer would be no. I think that
the answer is no.
Exactly. And then additionally, when we're looking at imagery that we're using, is some sort of blessing been given to, those people who don't exist in that community to be using this? Because the reality is that when we are taking something that does not belong in our community, and then we're taking it for our own ability to achieve success, that's appropriation. And we need to be really cautious about the fact that if we are trying to fix our old mistakes by addressing what has happened with appropriation, we need to not think of what we want as, white settlers, the tenants on, reclaimed land. We need to speak directly to the community whose culture we've stolen from them. And so does that indigenous community have an opinion? Let's listen, let's ask. And if they are against us using any sorts of imagery, any sense of relatable product to their community in a way that's not even profiting them, then we shouldn't be using it. And I think to answer your initial question, what should be changed, if all of it or some of it? I think the answer is that we really can't make that decision. I think it's up to the people whose culture we have used to capitalize on. And if the answer is no, we can't use any of it, then that's the line drawn in the sand. And we have to go back to the drawing board and create a new idea that feels inclusive. And that also means that we do that with the understanding that we're going to continue to speak and investigate and not just pull a branding idea out of the hat, but we have to be more thoughtful about marketing, and we need to be more methodical about it and inclusive in that decision-making process.
Fair point. There is another way to contextualize sports as weaponless combat. It is at its core both a healing agent and a divisive phenomenon at the same time. On the surface, there is a winner and a loser, but at the end of the day, that's just record keeping. The sexual assault cases brought up against Washington Redskins employees, 15 of them, you could argue that what made that okay was the presence of the logo. So what is that kind of saying about the culture around the Redskins? to you. I think that's the issue. The issue isn't the logo so much. It's the culture around the use of the logo. Does that make sense?
I don't think it's I think it's the chicken or the egg argument. You know,
Yeah.
Is it our misunderstanding use and representation of the logo, or is it the fact that people feel empowered by whatever they have with that logo there? And the reality is that I don't think you can say because this logo exists and it's being used by, let's say, white people, that that is an excuse for bad behaviors. But I do think that, like, we also need to acknowledge that the use of this logo and this name, which is a racial slur on a community to create a classist version of divide when, you know, white settlers came to the Americas, is progressed systemically. And so that reaction of, you know, is there a community and culture regarding the people behind this imagery is not healthy. Well, that's a part of what's happened out of this appropriated culture that we've created. And so I think that what's really important is, you know, the recognizing that it's not just happening, you know, within the team and the management. This is also having a really difficult effect on the Indigenous community because of this, you know, understanding and creation of this cartoon version of who they are and how they exist in society. The Indigenous community has one of the highest suicidal rates amongst teenagers. Their inability to feel that they can advance without it being a government-granted recuperating opportunity on their reservation. That's not okay. You want kids in this community to feel validated with the imagery that they feel represents them as who they are today, and not a stereotype version that says that they are a not as smart man as their, you know, horrible stigmatized image of like they are, you know, an Indigenous community that didn't have access to westernized things until we brought them there. These people are just as capable as everybody, and you know, it's just about the tools that are provided to them. And there are tools out there that hurt people, and that exists in also marketing, also the conversations that we create around it, and the doors we open. And I think if we can learn anything, just because we have this imagery in place, that's not advancing this community. It's actually continuing to be used as a tool to hold them back. So are people retaliating? Are people acting inappropriately beyond this imagery? Yeah, and I think that this goes beyond of just like what exists under the umbrella of what it is now. This is, you know, hundreds of years of a divide of people feeling empowered by an egregious sort of, you know, personality using this thing as protection. I don't know, that went on a little bit of a tangent, but there I am.
Okay, so to sum up your argument, for the viewers, it's basically a chicken or the egg argument. We need to ask the Indigenous people how to honor them, or if they want to be honored. Is that essentially what you're saying in a sentence?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. And they can say, we don't want to be involved in, you know, your sport. We do want to be involved, but we have an expectation of financial recuperation, or we want to be the ones who create the marketing narrative. But the starting place is not, oh, let's reinvent the same thing. No. Let's have a conversation.
Okay, so let's apply that logic that Jake just laid out to the Colin Kaepernick situation. Does it apply, Max, at all?
I think it does a little bit, yeah.
Because I think there is a captive audience there, as I've said to you privately many times, who have paid to watch a football game, and instead they get to watch a protest. Again, this speaks back to the idea of content versus intent. It's not the speech I have a problem with. It's the methodology he used to do it. Now, you can make an argument that he is an athlete and therefore has an elevated status and a responsibility to speak on these sorts of issues if he wants to, but not inside a packed stadium of 50,000 people who paid to see a football game in a stadium. They paid to have fun. They paid to be out with their families. They paid to experience the different culture of the person next to them. What would you say to that?
You know who can't pay to have fun anymore? Philando Castile, George Floyd, Sandra Bland. I could go on for 3 days. Breonna Taylor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, kind of tough, if you are against the protesting, I think, tough. He has a platform that is where he knows Colin Kaepernick and other players around the world protesting have platforms that they know people can see and will make an impact beyond just a tweet or a Instagram post. And it is a moment in the game before the games start where everybody is watching them. The networks show the anthems. Everybody in the stadium is, pretty much in their seats during the anthems. And so I think it makes change in a way that a social media post can never.
Yes.
I agree with you, Max. I think that what we need to recognize is there are a lot of people that no longer have those freedoms because of how bad issues continue to be in our country around racism. And so, when you think about what this country stands for, just like going to a game, if you have a subscription to Spotify or some sort of network TV channel and you don't like what's on, you just don't have to listen. You don't have to partake. That doesn't mean that, that's your right to protest, to just not want to support the thing that is right in front of you. But that doesn't mean that the thing right in front of you shouldn't be made. When you look at what's going on in these games, the whole idea of let's do the national anthem in its own is a protest. It was a protest against before we broke off from the state of Britain. It was a protest for people in our country who feel represented or not represented by that flag. And, to ask everybody to stand for what that flag stands for is a protest. And so to say that today, I don't feel like that flag is representing the values that are behind it, that is a protest. And I think to say when you have a bunch of non-Black people going to a sport that is predominantly, Black people entertaining white people and people of privilege, that in its own, to have that sort of sense of entertain me, but do it the way that I want, and using them as
like
a problem.
Circus.
Like a circus is in its own, is a mentality, a microaggression. And I think that's very resemblance of old roots of
For those who don't know, the term microaggression refers to a implicit infringement upon someone's freedom of expression or speech based upon some trivial aspect of either their appearance or their culture. Is that a fair definition, Jake?
Yeah, I think so. And I think a microaggression is, it's something that is acts of, racism or bias towards a community that is marginalized and done in a way that is so subtle, so what feels unremarkable, but yet the people in that community feel it because it happens to them consistently. But the person who is doing an expression such as this would be very unaware. You know, when we say, oh, that person said a derogatory remark against a group in a racist manner, we can so easily point our fingers and go, oh, you're a racist. But racism is so embedded in our lexicon, our way of talking about things, that microaggressions are sometimes racism, ableism, anti-feminism, done in a much more subtle way that normally would not be caught unless to the untrained eye or the person living the experience that it's aimed at.
And very true, which is a perfect segue into my third topic of the day, and that, of course, is the all-important conversation these days about Black Lives Matter. Now, before I get into this, I want to say that I openly support Black Lives Matter from a message standpoint. I do not, however, support them from a methodological standpoint, similar to my issue with the Kaepernick protest. Protesting in the middle of a library or somewhere else where a certain level of respect and quiet is expected is totally different than protesting in the middle of a street. That's what I'm saying about methodology. Location matters. Whether your audience is captive to participating in protest or not, that matters.
If I may, I think to counter your argument a little bit, Gold, of the location matters. I think it does matter, but I think if the Black Lives Matter movement and, African Americans wait for when white people say it is acceptable to protest and where white people say it's acceptable to protest and, fight for their rights, they'll never protest. It'll just never happen.
Well, and to go beyond that, I think that when you look at what is right and what is not right in a manner of protesting in location, I think like that in its own is a microaggression of, class systems, civilization saying there's a way to be civilized. And when you start doing that, you are by, a system creating ways that people don't get the coverage that they want. So, going all the way back to like the Titanic, they literally separated classes, and the people that were living in first class literally did not see the people in third class. And so what happens there is that when suddenly you hit an iceberg, a whole group of people get access to things first because they are the ones protected. The other group do not get access, and a whole lot of people have a lot more loss and traumas because they are never able to get ahead, because they are never able to be seen. And so being seen, we need to throw out the door that there's a proper way versus an improper way of doing it. And one of the things that you look at in our modern day society is you look at the neighborhoods you grew up in. You can say this is predominantly a white neighborhood, a Black neighborhood, a Latino neighborhood. And when you do that, you're creating what's known as the red lines. You're creating barriers so people living in different communities are not exposed to the other person's community. So now what's happened up is that we believe, okay, we had a civil rights movement, 60 years ago, so now things are better. Well, they're not better. And what we're seeing is bubbling up is that, no, we've continued to be segregated in a more civilized manner. And when I say civilized, please take that with a grain of salt, but we've been in a more, let's say, moment of...
it's been cleaned up.
It's been cleaned up. And what happens is that...
but it's still there.
It's still there. And what people are saying is, I have not been able to advance. I still will never be able to fit and move to a white neighborhood. In fact, when I am in a white neighborhood, I am looked at in a way that you don't belong here. And so that's what happens when you start to put up walls saying, this is a proper place and this is an improper place. It in its own is a system of oppression.
You have those crazy people in St. Louis when the protesters walked into their gated community to protest. You have those crazy people walking out onto their front lawn like the worst Bond villains that have, of all time, with the big guns, saying you don't belong, get out of my neighborhood. I'm even afraid of your presence.
And we all know when somebody is in an area that we don't feel that they belong, or we don't feel that they match the environment, or we feel that they stand out, that in its own is the reason it should happen there. The fact that we still have this idea of like, oh, I would never see them there, or this behavior would never be seen in this situation, in its own is the very reason why it should be done there. It's because of the fact that we stop and say to ourselves, this doesn't look right. And the fact that it doesn't look right means that is why it needs to be done there.
The fact of the matter here is that regardless of whether they recognize it or not, every single person on this earth has either participated in or been a victim of a protest of some sort. And that is the point I really want to drive home here today, that sports cannot be depoliticized. People try to depoliticize it, but it is weaponless combat like we've been talking about. And situations like Kenny Stills with his protest of Breonna Taylor exemplify that role it should and does continue to have. With that, any closing thoughts here?
Well, thanks for having me today, Avery. It's always a blast to see you and support all your great conversations. And Max, it's great to chat and share some thoughts on things that are happening.
Thank you. Same to you. And thanks for having me, Gold. I'll come on whenever you want. Just let me know and text me when you want to come on mine. And yes, it was fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So for Avery Schaefer, Max O'Neill, and special guest Jake, this is me saying so long until next Tuesday when I will be back with Zan. This has been another episode of Sports Talk from A to Z. See you Tuesday.